The first thing I did after reincarnating was to grab the poison and rush to the dumpling shop. In the west of the city, that young man selling dumplings was the real crown prince, lost among the common folk. Soon after, he would return to the palace with his childhood sweetheart. First, kill the fake crown prince, then torment the crown princess. On the day the crown princess died, the snow falling from the sky turned red upon hitting the ground. I was that unlucky crown princess. Unexpectedly, I bumped into the fake crown prince at the dumpling shop entrance. Sword in hand, I raised an eyebrow. What? Joining me? The crown prince's wedding day. The eastern palace was heavily guarded. Xiao Jinglan and I were just about to lift our cups of wedding wine. Suddenly, hurried footsteps echoed outside. The Imperial Guard commander kicked open the door, clutching a scroll of imperial yellow. After reading the imperial edict, he waved for the guards behind him to seize Xiao Jinglan. The folding fan in my hand clattered to the floor. I looked up to meet Xiao Jinglan's equally stunned eyes. Xiao Jinglan wasn't the real crown prince. Today, the true crown prince had been found. I rushed to the palace that very night to seek an audience with the emperor. Seated upon the high dais, the emperor wore a weary expression. He sighed, his gaze turning to me, deep and lingering. Rest assured, you and she, regardless of who the crown prince may be, you shall remain the crown princess consort. I shook my head anxiously. Your servant does not seek the position of crown princess consort, but rather, enough. The emperor's expression darkened, cutting me off. Escort the crown princess consort out of the palace. Stumbling out the palace gates, a ghostly figure by the corridor pillars called out to me. You are Jiang Yuanshi? My crown prince's consort? His features bore a striking resemblance to the emperor's, yet his slightly upturned eyes carried a hint of shrewdness. He appraised me from head to toe before adding, nothing special. My mind was preoccupied with Xiao Jinglan's safety, so I paid little heed to his words. I curtsied and hurried away. Unexpectedly, days later, the crown prince sought me out himself. A cryptic smile played at the corners of his mouth as he led me into the imperial prison. Xiao Jinglan was pinned rigidly to the gallows, his face deathly pale. Chains thicker than a wrist pierced his scapula, blood dripping steadily from the gallows, pooling on the floor in a crimson stain. Gazing at Xiao Jinglan, now barely recognizable as human, a wrenching pain gripped my chest, and I collapsed to the ground. Does the crown princess enjoy this grand gift I've prepared for you? Had not the Empress Dowager quarreled with His Majesty, swapping me for an abandoned infant from the common folk? All the splendor and wealth this lowly being has enjoyed for 20 years should have been mine. The crown prince seized me by the nape and dragged me before Xiao Jinglan. He personally seized a red-hot branding iron and pressed it viciously into Xiao Jinglan's wound. A sizzling sound filled the air, mingled with the acrid stench of burning flesh. No. Please. Don't. I violently shook off my bonds and lunged toward Xiao Jinglan, desperate to shield him. But the crown prince yanked me back by my hair, dragging me out of the cell. His cold, menacing voice whispered against my ear. I am the crown prince. If I want him dead, he dies. A eunuch led a woman dressed in pale yellow robes to wait outside. I knew her, the crown prince's childhood sweetheart. When he lived among commoners, her family had sheltered him. The emperor disapproved of her low birth, delaying permission for her to marry into the eastern palace. The woman threw herself into the crown prince's arms, calling him Brother Rui. His Majesty has bestowed the name Shaolin upon the crown prince. Yet throughout the entire palace, only she still called him by his old name. The crown prince lowered his head to kiss her forehead, his icy gaze settling upon me, like a venomous snake poised to strike. Days later, Xiao Jinglan was executed by dismemberment. Hearing the news, darkness flooded my vision and I collapsed from my chair. Xiao Jinglan, The blood-tinged darkness spread like wildly growing vines, suffocating me. Miss. Wake up! A pair of slightly cold hands touched my face. I grabbed those hands and sat up abruptly, taking in the familiar surroundings of the room. The maid Yinxiang murmured softly. Did you have another nightmare, miss? 5 days ago, I was reborn. Reborn 1 month before I was to marry Xiao Jinglan. At this time, the true crown prince had not yet been found. It took me some time to confirm I had truly been reborn. The events of my past life returned like recurring nightmares each night. I remember the day I died. Heavy snow must have fallen over the capital. The cold was bitter, yet I felt nothing. I pierced my throat with the hairpin Xiao Jinglan had given me. I collapsed beneath the plum tree in the eastern palace. That white plum tree, perhaps for the first time, shed petals stained crimson. Seeing my dazed expression, Yunxiang called my name again. Only then did I snap back to reality. I pulled several silver notes from the dressing table and handed them to her. Go buy me some poison, the most potent kind. The kind that strikes down instantly. Do this discreetly. Make sure no one finds out. Yunxiang nodded and left with the notes. She never questioned. Whatever I said, she obeyed. It was so in my past life. And so it is in this one. Yet it was this very Yunxiang. For shielding me with all her might. Zhao Yinshui cut out her tongue and cast her into the brothel. A prize for filthy beggars. I knelt before Shaolin, begging him for a very long time before he finally returned Yunxiang to me. But the Yunxiang he gave back was nothing but a handful of white bones. Only on my deathbed did Zhao Yinshui tell me. The soup I drank every day was simmered with Yunxiang's flesh. The thought made me cling to the table corner, retching violently. Shaolin, Zhao Yinshu, and the one who pushed me into the abyss while perched on high. Having been reborn, I would never let the events of my past life repeat. Yunxiang returned swiftly. The moment she pushed open the door, sunlight flooded the room. I instinctively raised my arm to shield my eyes. Perhaps having been blind for too long in my previous life, I hadn't yet adjusted to the brightness of this one. Yunxiang placed the poison she'd bought before me. Miss. The shopkeeper said this poison is potent. Just a single coin's worth is enough to kill someone. Even a divine immortal couldn't save them. I stared at the large packet of poison, lost in thought. Yunxiang was still so considerate. Father returned from the Imperial Academy. He mentioned the Crown Prince had been absent for 3 consecutive days due to illness. I was warming my hands around my teacup and paused slightly. Did he say what the illness was? It seems he caught a cold. In my previous life, Xiao Jinglan hadn't fallen ill at this time. Could it be that because I was reborn, the trajectory of this life was different from the last? I hurriedly set down my teacup and gave Yunxiang a meaningful glance. Yunxiang immediately understood, Miss. The books drying in the courtyard haven't been brought in yet. I slapped my forehead. How forgetful of me. Father wanted to say more. But when he turned back, I was already gone. I returned to my room, retrieved the packet of poison Yunxiang had bought, and carefully tucked it into my sleeve. The night is long and full of dreams. Unforeseen changes are bound to arise. From this day forward, Shaolin and Zhao Yinshu must vanish completely from this world. Changing into plain clothes, I slipped out the back gate, taking a detour. I arrived at the steamed bun shop in the eastern part of the city. From afar, I saw the once reckless Crown Prince Shaolin, from my past life, now bent over kneading dough. Batch after batch of buns emerged from the steamer, their steam filling the air. A deafening roar echoed in my ears. My limbs went cold, and I stumbled backward several steps without realizing it. Before my eyes flashed the image of him pinning me beneath him, forcing me to watch the execution. No matter how much I cried out, it was useless. Blood flowed through the cracks in the stone slabs, splattering everywhere. stinging my eyes painfully. Later, Shaolin forcibly married me because the emperor declared that the crown prince's consort could only be Jiang Yuanshi. On our wedding day, my wails of despair echoed throughout the entire Eastern Palace. I begged him, but he showed me no mercy. So I, naturally, would show him none either. At this moment, Shaolin still didn't know he was actually the crown prince. He was Shen Rue, the bun seller. He and Zhao Yanshua stood together, introducing the varieties of buns to the old woman who always bought them. After buying her buns, the woman remarked as she left that the two made a perfect match. A heavenly union. Zhao Yanshu blushed coyly, turning her face away, though the corners of her eyes and brows betrayed an uncontrollable smile. Yes, they were a heavenly union. And me? I was the ungrateful stone standing between them. In my past life, Zhao Yanshua resented me for taking the crown princess's position and deliberately ran outside the city. When Shaolin found her and brought her back, she claimed her eyes hurt and whined that she wanted me to suffer the same pain. So Shaolin gouged out my eyes to appease her. Afterward, he even told the emperor it was my own carelessness. How careless could I possibly be to lose both eyes? After I went blind, Zhao Yanshua found new ways to torment me. She'd pour burning charcoal into my hands and order me to catch it. If I missed even one piece, she'd kill someone from my clan. I shook my head hard, trying to banish these memories of my past life from my mind. Seizing a moment when Shaolin and Zhao Yanshu weren't looking, I lifted my skirt and slipped toward the back door of the steamed bun shop. All I needed to do was poison their food. Then I could live out this life in peace. Unexpectedly, I stumbled upon a familiar figure. I looked at the man who should have been recuperating in the Eastern Palace. Then at the sword he held in his hand. I raised an eyebrow. What? You in? He instantly understood my meaning, his sword-wielding hand trembling imperceptibly. You reincarnated too? I nodded, tugging his sleeve as I pulled him inside. This time, we must strike first and kill those two. I brought a large bag of poison, enough to kill them both. Xiao Jinglan chuckled softly. I never knew Man could be so ruthless. Hearing him use my childhood nickname again felt like stepping into another lifetime. I turned and glared at him. Put your sword away before we talk. Xiao Jinglan sheathed his blade and watched me poison every dish. Finally, he took the remaining poison from my hands and used every last bit without waste. To be absolutely certain, Xiao Jinglan and I hurried away. On the way back, I counted the minutes on my fingers. They should be dead by now. Right? Xiao Jinglan suddenly stopped. Should we go back and check? So the two of us sneaked back to the dumpling shop. Crowds had gathered inside and outside the entrance. Government officials were present, carrying out two bodies covered in white cloth. Just moments ago they were fine. How could they vanish so suddenly? So young. Such a pity. Not a pity at all. Xiao Jinglan and I exchanged glances, both of us struggling to suppress the corners of our mouths. Shaolin and Zhao Yanshu were dead. Even father could tell my mood had lifted considerably. He said Xiao Jinglan had petitioned the emperor for permission, and we would be married in 5 days. Truthfully, the Ministry of Rites had already delivered the wedding paraphernalia last month. A day earlier or later made no difference. I went to the Eastern Palace to find Xiao Jinglan. He had just returned from archery practice at the range, clad in riding gear. His sword-like brows and starry eyes were framed by a headband still tied across his forehead. He casually unfastened his wrist guard and tossed it to a servant, then lifted his gaze to meet mine. His icy expression melted instantly. How long have you been waiting? Man? Not long. I'd just arrived. Following him into the chamber, I asked, Your Highness, why did you change the wedding date? He dismissed all attendants with a wave. Then, extending his arm, he drew me into his embrace. Holding me close, Xiao Jinglan leaned down and whispered softly into my ear. Man, I don't want to wait any longer. 5 days later. The Eastern Palace was adorned with festive lanterns and decorations. Radiating joy. Xiao Jinglan, clad in a deep crimson wedding robe, looked even more striking, his features like a painted portrait. The dragon and phoenix wedding candles burned quietly before the bed. Xiao Jinglan held me close as we sank into the embroidered mandarin duck quilt. A wave of restlessness washed over my face. I heard a muffled chuckle, followed by a shower of soft, rapid kisses. The canopy hung low, candle wicks crackling softly. Long fingers patiently undid the knots of my sash. Suddenly, urgent knocking echoed. Your Highness. His Majesty summons you and the Crown Princess to the palace. A sense of impending doom washed over me. In the imperial study, Shaolin, who should have been a corpse, stood beside the emperor. His gaze was sinister as he stared at Xiao Jinglan and me. Shaolin wasn't dead. Where exactly had things gone wrong? I furrowed my brow. My eyes filled with confusion as I looked at Xiao Jinglan. He squeezed my palm gently and whispered, "Let's see first." Outside the hall, the night stretched on endlessly. Inside the hall, lamps burned brightly. A breeze, its origin unknown, swept past the candlesticks on the imperial desk. The flickering candlelight danced like a restless shadow, casting an eerie glow upon the emperor's profile. From afar, I saw the emperor holding a jade token, his fingertips tracing its intricate patterns. The design of that token was all too familiar to me. In my past life, Shaolin was discovered by the emperor's confidant after accidentally revealing this very jade pendant. The emperor sent investigators and learned that the crown prince he had raised for years was not his biological son. The true heir huddled in that tiny steamed bun shop, living in constant fear. Perhaps out of guilt, the emperor later indulged Shaolin excessively. Indulged to the point of permitting him to slaughter meritorious officials at will. My father, brothers, and family, all were slain by his hand. Brother Jinglan, did you see the jade token in His Majesty's hand? Later. You must insist it's yours, lost not long ago. I have a way to make the emperor believe you. To avoid being overheard, I deliberately lowered my voice. In the past, whenever I needed Xiao Jinglan's help, I always called him Brother Jinglan. Xiao Jinglan whispered in a voice only we could hear. All right. I'll do whatever you say. As Xiao Jinglan and I approached, the emperor lifted his gaze and glanced at us. It was just a fleeting look. Yet, I felt the weight of the emperor's authority bearing down on me. Perhaps the trajectory of this lifetime had been utterly disrupted by Xiao Jinglan and my rebirth. Perhaps the emperor still remained unaware of the truths buried beneath the palace walls. He did not immediately arrest Xiao Jinglan as he had in the previous life. The hall fell into profound silence. The emperor tucked away the jade token in his hand and beckoned Shaolin forward. By candlelight, I finally saw his face clearly. A terrifying scar now marred his brow. He resembled a demon crawling from hell far more than the Shaolin of my past life. He absolutely, positively must not succeed to the throne. The emperor tapped the tabletop lightly, his voice deep and grave. The secret guards brought this man back from the mass grave. Not only does he possess the late Empress Dowager's belongings, but he bears such a striking resemblance to me. Prince, do you find that strange? Xiao Jinglan and I exchanged a glance, understanding immediately. The poison administered that day must have failed somehow, allowing him to escape death. That Zhao Yanshu must still be alive too. Before Xiao Jinglan could speak, the emperor continued. I recall indeed giving the empress consort such a jade token back then. Why has the crown prince never been seen wearing it all these years? His gaze remained fixed on Xiao Jinglan, scrutinizing. It seemed impossible to confirm whether Xiao Jinglan or Shaolin was the true crown prince. Xiao Jinglan remained composed. This jade pendant was my mother's keepsake. I never had the heart to wear it. When presenting the betrothal gifts to the crown princess recently, I took it out to examine it but accidentally lost it. I have no idea where this person obtained my mother's jade pendant. Hearing this, Xiao Lin grew frantic. He shouted in protest from the side. You're lying. The peasant family who adopted me said this jade token was placed in my swaddling clothes. It was left to me by my mother. The emperor's expression darkened instantly as he coldly demanded. Did I not know an object could belong to two masters? Since this jade plaque was both an item this person carried from childhood and an item the crown prince lost. Does the crown prince have proof this plaque was lost by you? I detected a peculiar undertone in the emperor's words. At this moment, he seemed to believe more strongly that Xiao Lin was his true son. After all, that face bore a 70% resemblance to his own. I stepped forward and bowed gracefully to the emperor. Your Majesty, the crown prince has already given this jade token to this humble servant. It was I who carelessly lost it. And His Highness was merely protecting me. His Highness once demonstrated to me the intricate mechanism within this token. Would your Majesty not entrust it to me? A single test will reveal its truth. With all eyes upon us, how could I possibly fake anything? I've carried this jade token daily, how could I not know its secrets? Xiao Lin sneered. The emperor scrutinized him with a stern expression, then glanced at me before tossing the token to a nearby eunuch attendant. Yuan Shi. Regardless of who becomes crown prince, you are the crown princess consort I have chosen. I knelt with a thud. Thank you for your Majesty's favor. I am humbled. I entered the Eastern Palace not for the title of crown princess, but for Xiao Jinglan. In my previous life, it was precisely because the emperor insisted on making me crown princess. That displeased Xiao Lin and displeased Xiao Yanxuo. It led to my tragic end. He sat upon the throne, unaware that a sovereign's favor could sometimes be a deadly blade. I took the jade token from the eunuch's hand and traced its edges for a long time. Finding the hidden mechanism within, I pressed it gently. The jade token split into two halves. Where they joined, two small characters were engraved. Yuanin. Those were the childhood name given to the crown prince by the late empress. I returned the jade token to the emperor. The sovereign seated upon the dragon throne stared blankly at the split jade in his hands. His once straight spine suddenly slumped, as if his very soul had been torn from him. In that dazed moment, I felt the figure seated alone upon the dais had aged several years. After a long silence, the emperor sighed. The mechanism within this jade token. It was I who taught Qinghe. His gaze then fell upon Xiao Lin, who stood beside him, his face frozen in utter bewilderment. His voice carried a hint of anger. If this was something you carried with you every day, why did you not know its hidden secrets? I. Xiao Lin's face turned deathly pale, his words stumbling and incoherent. I discreetly winked at Xiao Jinglan. Xiao Lin would never guess how I discovered the hidden compartment within that jade token. Had he not choked me in my previous life, attempting to gouge out my eyes with his own hands? The agony left me gasping for breath, screaming at the top of my lungs. In the struggle, I wrenched the jade token from his waist. It fell to the ground, shattering into two pieces. Only then did I realize its hidden secrets. Recalling all the sins Xiao Lin committed in my past life, my gaze toward him deepened with disgust. Since the poison failed to kill him, and the vortex of fate has swept us together once more, Xiao Lin, this lifetime, I absolutely will not let you off easily. I had thought it was clear who the true crown prince was between Xiao Jinglan and Xiao Lin. In his fury, the emperor would surely impose the ultimate punishment on Xiao Lin. But unexpectedly, he didn't utter a single word about how to deal with Xiao Lin. The emperor had not been favored in his youth. Cunning and scheming, he ultimately outmaneuvered all his brothers to ascend the throne. The most outrageous act of his life was stealing General He Lin's betrothed. He even made her his empress. She died in childbirth while bearing his heir. The emperor never remarried, leaving the imperial harem forever empty. When he learned Xiao Jinglan wasn't his biological son, he discovered the late empress had hated him until her dying breath. Even a child could be used as a tool for revenge against him. He vented all his hatred upon Xiao Jinglan, who bore no blood relation to him. That imperial edict sentencing Xiao Jinglan to dismemberment was written by his own hand. Yet now, he shows such leniency toward Shaolin, merely confining him temporarily to an abandoned side hall. Doubts inevitably stir within me. All may withdraw. I am weary. The chief eunuch extinguished the candles on the imperial desk and helped the emperor rise. As I lifted my foot to step over the threshold of the imperial study, I turned back to glance behind me, as if compelled by some unseen force. All I saw was the figure of an old man, his back bent with age, dragging his heavy steps. He vanished into the depths of the curtain. Back in the eastern palace, Xiao Jinglan seemed possessed by some strange frenzy. He pinned me against the door and kissed me for a long time. From tentative, fleeting touches at first, to deep, lingering kisses. Only when moonlight streamed through the window did he finally release me, his breath light against my forehead. Man, tell me, after I died in our past life, did you suffer terribly? Xiao Jinglan, ever the shrewd strategist, had long pieced together the truth from my unusual behavior. Clutching his lean waist, I murmured softly, yes. It was awful. Terrible. That's why this lifetime, I'm reclaiming what's mine. Warm fingertips traced my cheek. Xiao Jinglan's voice was hoarse. I'm sorry. I failed to protect you. Then you'd better live well and make it up to me slowly. Another round of intimate caresses followed. Xiao Jinglan ordered the meal served, then suddenly asked me, that poison, where did you buy it? Starving. I hurried to eat, gesturing toward Yunsheng waiting nearby. Yunsheng answered with perfect nonchalance, from Huichen Hall in the East Market. Why? No wonder. Xiao Jinglan sighed and explained to me. That's a shady shop. Their rat poison is made from starch. My hand, holding the ladle, froze midair above the soup bowl. I found myself both amused and exasperated. So this was the reason Shaolin had narrowly escaped death. Truly, fate plays cruel tricks. Half a month passed. Yet the emperor still hadn't dealt with Shaolin. Instead, the astronomical observatory grew bustling. The chief astrologer presented a thick scroll of calculations during court, reporting celestial anomalies. These portents bode ill for the nation, requiring one bearing auspicious omens to avert them. As for this auspicious individual, after thorough investigation, they traced it back to Shaolin. The emperor was overjoyed, granting Shaolin a ceremonial post. He was granted special permission to remain within the palace grounds to facilitate the astronomical observatory's work. When I heard the news, I was feeding fish in the courtyard, scattering a handful of fish food. I watched the ripples spread across the water. Yet, the sight of the fish scrambling for food held no interest for me. Xiao Jinglan wrapped his arms around me from behind, who's made my little one frown again. I tossed the fish food to Yinxiang and pulled Xiao Jinglan to sit in the pavilion nearby. Who doesn't know the astronomical observatory has always been the emperor's man? His Majesty still suspects you. Seeing my frustration, Xiao Jinglan chuckled softly. Shaolin does bear an uncanny resemblance to father. He's always been suspicious. I frowned. By keeping him close, His Majesty seems to be protecting him instead. Xiao Jinglan gazed at the lake. The fish had scattered after finishing their meal, and the ripples on the water's surface gradually faded. How about grilled fish for dinner tonight? Catching my glare, Xiao Jinglan simply pulled me into his embrace. We have all the time in the world. Since both Man and I have been reborn, knowing secrets unknown to others, we must make good use of this advantage. Shaolin was raised among commoners since childhood, nothing but an ignorant, incompetent fool. His only support and reliance is the emperor. What if His Majesty no longer trusts him? The secret guards I dispatched days ago have just returned with a confidential message. The old retainers who served the late empress vanished without a trace after leaving the palace. Now, no one can verify Shaolin's true identity. Because of this so-called auspicious sign, Shaolin thrives in the palace, basking in unparalleled favor. His devotion to Zhao Yinshua is truly unwavering. Somehow, he persuaded the emperor. He even managed to bring Zhao Yinshu into the palace. That day when I encountered Zhao Yinshu in the palace, I nearly didn't recognize her. The peasant girl who once sold buns and coarse cloth now wore brocade robes, her hair adorned with the most fashionable peacock feather hairpins in the capital. Her expression was supremely haughty, and several timid palace maids followed behind her. Heads bowed low, dared not meet her gaze. To the uninformed, she might well have been the palace's new mistress. She flicked her handkerchief as she strode toward me. I glanced at her, waiting for her to bow in greeting. After all, Xiao Jinglan was still crown prince at this time, and I was his legally wedded crown princess, betrothed by His Majesty's decree. But Zhao Yinshua stopped before me, lifted her chin, and rolled her eyes at me. She declared loudly, "Some people picked up a stone, don't mistake it for a treasure." I smiled, feigning unfamiliarity, and asked with feigned confusion, "And who might you be?" Immediately, a palace maid rushed over and knelt before me, her voice trembling as she replied, "Greetings, Crown Princess. Miss Zhao is the cousin of Minister Shen Rui. She has come to the palace to visit Minister Shen." Incidentally, at this time, Shaolin had not yet received his imperial name and was still called Shen Rui. "Oh." I raised an eyebrow, sizing up Zhao Yinshua with a tone laced with sarcasm. "With that haughty demeanor of yours, I was just wondering when the palace gained a new consort I hadn't met." Zhao Yinshua couldn't hold her temper. "Pa, what crown princess? I'll see how long you can stay so smug." There are no walls in the palace that don't let the wind through. The emperor brought back a man from the common folk who bore a 70% resemblance to him. It's highly likely he's the true crown prince. Even my father and brother know about this now. Zhao Yinshua is convinced Shaolin is the real crown prince. She's latched onto Shaolin like a vine, clearly intent on trampling me underfoot. Not only does she refuse to pay me respects, she looks at me with smug satisfaction. Her eyes held unmasked defiance. Yunxiang tugged at my sleeve, whispering, "Miss, has she lost her mind?" I laughed aloud. "Seems she has. We must bring her back to her senses." My tone turned sharp. "Miss Zhao has insulted this palace. Slap her face until she remembers her place." Zhao Yinshua screamed, "You dare! Rui is the true crown prince. The one you married is just an impostor. I will be the crown princess. Anyone who touches me, I'll have Rui skin you alive and tear you limb from limb." In her past life, she had been this arrogant and ignorant. Back then, Shaolin was already crown prince, shielding her in every way. But now, whether Shaolin remains crown prince is up for debate. For her to dare rant like this, utterly pig-stupid. The palace maids trailing Zhao Yinshua rushed forward to restrain her. The sharp crack of slaps echoed through the empty palace corridor. I had Yinxiang fetch a low stool, brought tea, and sat there watching Zhao Yinshua take her punishment. In this scene, Yinxiang and I looked every bit like the vicious mistress and servant tormenting Zhao Yinshu. Little did she know that in her previous life, when she struck at Yinxiang and me, her cruelty far surpassed this. Soon, Zhao Yinshu's cheeks swelled high, and a trickle of blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. Her once beautiful face was beaten beyond recognition. Shaolin received word and hurried over. The emperor and Xiao Jinglan followed behind him. Xiao Jinglan wore an imperial robe, his hair tightly bound in a top knot, clearly fresh from court. Zhao Yinshua saw Shaolin as if he were a savior. Crying, she crawled to his feet. "Ruage, Save me. Save Schwer. Tears glistened in her eyes as she lifted her bruised face for Shaolin to see. Schwer doesn't know what she did to offend the crown princess. Why would she treat me like this? Schwer hurts so much. I narrowed my eyes. A smile curling my lips. That wasn't what she'd said earlier. Does it hurt? What I endured before. What Yinxiang endured, it hurt 1,000. 10,000 times worse than this. Does Miss Zhao know I'm the crown princess now? I bowed to the emperor. Then rose, discreetly giving Xiao Jinglan a reassuring glance. Pushing Yinxiang aside, I knelt heavily before the emperor. Your Majesty. Miss Zhao claims Shindarin is the true crown prince, that she is the future crown princess. She said this servant is nothing. As I spoke, I secretly pinched my thigh, lowering my head with tears welling in my eyes. I appeared even more pitiable than Zhao Yanshua after being beaten. Your servant cannot bear it. She said it didn't matter to me. But her words clearly cast doubt upon your Majesty. Your Majesty is wise and mighty, capable of making your own decisions. How dare an outsider meddle? That's why I reprimanded her. Zhao Yanshu was stunned by my words. Her eyes widened like copper bells. What nonsense are you spouting? How dare you? A piercing gaze swept between me and Zhao Yanshu, finally settling on her. The emperor flung his sleeves and thundered, this is the imperial palace. Not some place for anyone to run wild. Shinrue. Control your people. Should this happen again, I shall punish you severely. Yuanxi is the crown princess I personally selected. I will not tolerate anyone questioning my decision. Shaolin is not yet the crown prince. Zhao Yanshu's behavior was tantamount to roasting him over a fire. He dared not utter a word of protest, dragging Zhao Yanshu away. Zhao Yanshu resisted, still wailing. Exasperated by her clamor, Shaolin struck her unconscious, hoisted her onto his shoulder, and carried her away. As he departed, he shot me a meaningful glance. On the way back to the Eastern Palace, Xiao Jinglan kept staring at me. I recalled how I'd suddenly knelt before the emperor earlier, and he'd instinctively reached out to help me up. After sensing something amiss, he silently withdrew his hand. The scene was truly amusing. I touched my own face and asked him with a smile, is there something on my face? Xiao Jinglan shook his head. No. I just think today's man is especially charming. I like it very much. My face flushed, and I scolded him for being improper. But once we returned, he dragged me into something far more improper. We didn't even bother with supper. During the heavy rains, the Wei River burst its banks. Xiao Jinglan was busy studying flood control plans with the Ministry of Works. I didn't see him for quite some time. I learned to manage the household, often poring over the ledgers until midnight. One night, exhausted from reading, I fell asleep with my head on the desk. In my dream, Shaolin was crowned crown prince once more. Zhao Yanshua stood beside him, laughing haughtily, fake is fake. How dare you pretend to be royal blood? I awoke to find my palms drenched in cold sweat. As long as Shaolin and Zhao Yanshua live, they will always be a threat to Xiao Jinglan and me. On the day of the autumn equinox, I had Yunsheng assist me as I personally cooked several dishes. Crystal 8 treasure duck, brocade spring bamboo shoots, crab roe shrimp cups, pine nut lily bulb pastries, and I warmed a pot of pomegranate wine. Xiao Jinglan hurried in, setting aside his outer robe. No sooner had he sat down than he asked in surprise, did you personally prepare these dishes today? I nodded, propping my chin up and winking at him. Hurry, taste and tell me how they are. Xiao Jinglan picked up his chopsticks and sampled a few bites. His eyes flickered slightly, as if recalling something. He set his chopsticks down and scrutinized the plate of pine nut and lily bulb pastries. What is it? Is there something wrong with this pastry? I asked suspiciously. Xiao Jinglan smiled and explained to me, pine nut and lily pastries are all the rage in the capital. Yet the imperial kitchen never prepares this dessert. I was curious about it as a child too. Later, I learned it was because the Empress Dowager is allergic to pine nuts. Whenever she ate these pastries, she would break out in a rash all over her body. So, the emperor ordered the imperial kitchen to ban this dessert. I thought to myself, so the emperor was quite devoted after all. Xiao Jinglan picked up a pine nut and lily pastry and offered it to my lips. Man. Let's help Shaolin out. I looked at the pastry and immediately understood. I smiled sweetly and said, sure. According to ancestral tradition, the Qinqiu festival falls 10 days after the start of autumn. On this day, the emperor hosts a banquet for his ministers and bestows rewards upon the officials. At the palace feast, Shaolin was dressed to turn heads. He was the most flamboyant figure present, second only to the emperor himself. It seemed as though the crown prince's position was already within his grasp. Several conservative ministers cast a single glance his way before shaking their heads and sighing. The maid standing beside Shaolin was none other than Zhao Yanshu. In the past, Zhao Yanshu's temperament would never have allowed her to disguise herself as a maid. Who knew what tricks Shaolin had used to coax her into this, making her so willingly comply? In previous years, I attended the Qinqiu banquet with my father and brothers. The dishes were mostly refined and simple. This year, however, they were far more elaborate than before. As the banquet commenced, the emperor frowned at the plate of white pastries on the table. He raised his hand as if to ask who had taken the liberty of adding this dish. His gaze glancing toward Xiao Jinglan and Shaolin, he silently dismissed the thought. After 3 rounds of wine, an unexpected incident occurred. Shaolin, who had eaten the pine nut and lily pastry, broke out in a red rash, looking quite terrifying. Quickly summoned the imperial physician. The emperor's expression changed drastically at the sight, hastily calling for the physician to examine Shaolin. After diagnosis, the physician informed the emperor, Minister Shen appears to be allergic to the pine nut and lily pastry. Hearing this, the emperor's eyes darkened. After a moment of deep thought, his gaze toward Shaolin grew intensely earnest as he remarked coolly, I recall the late empress also suffered from an allergy to pine nut and lily pastries. At these words, everyone understood the emperor was seizing upon the incident. Recently, rumors that Shaolin was the true crown prince had been spreading like wildfire. The emperor turned to Xiao Jinglan and asked, the crown prince seems uninterested in this pastry? Your servant has never tasted it and knows not its flavor. So naturally, I have no interest. Xiao Jinglan replied calmly and without condescension. Oh, in that case, Ru'er does bear some resemblance to the late empress. The emperor's gaze fixed firmly on Shaolin, observing the red rash covering his body. He spoke as if casually, could it be that Ru'er is actually the flesh and blood of this old man in Qinhe? The words had barely left his mouth when a minister stepped forward. Your Majesty, individuals possess different constitutions. To conclude that Minister Shen is of royal blood solely based on an allergic reaction is far too frivolous. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince serves the nation tirelessly, managing floods, repairing river embankments, working day and night. His dedication is evident to all. We implore your Majesty to reconsider. Xiao Jinglan rose and said, if Father Emperor deems me not the blood of you and Mother Empress, I have no words to argue. I only ask that Father Emperor allow me to complete the tasks at hand, to seek the welfare of the people. He now oversees the 6 ministries, holding a pivotal position. It's not that he's indispensable, but no one else could perform his duties better. After a prolonged stalemate, the emperor glanced at Xiao Jinglan, standing tall and composed. He waved his hand, gently turning the page. What I said earlier was but jest. News of the palace banquet incident swiftly spread throughout the court and the realm, recalling the emperor's ambiguous attitude. It was hard to discern what this deeply calculating sovereign truly intended. Xiao Jinglan, however, suddenly appeared more relaxed. He took me hunting. He brought me to the archery range to teach me. He embraced me from behind, took my hand, drew the bowstring, and shot. Arrow after arrow struck the bullseye. He said, "Wait a little longer. It won't be long now." Several days later, during morning court, the emperor suddenly remarked that Shaolin possessed some talent, and assigning him only ceremonial duties was a waste. He specifically named Xiao Jinglan and asked for his opinion. Xiao Jinglan organized the case he was handling, the Wei River breach, and handed it over to Shaolin. The Wei River breach had triggered floods, and he had labored tirelessly for months to manage the crisis. Now nearing its conclusion, handing it over to Shaolin now was tantamount to handing over the credit. Yet Xiao Jinglan acted with remarkable magnanimity. After our nighttime intimacy, he held me as we sat in the courtyard watching the moon. The full moon hung high in the pitch-black sky. Xiao Jinglan twirled a strand of my hair between his fingers, his voice still slightly hoarse. The Wei River case may seem near completion, but significant hidden dangers remain. Those local officials are no pushovers. Changing the person in charge now will only give them more opportunities to exploit. With Shaolin's abilities, he'll likely fare poorly and probably botch the job. Sure enough, a case that should have been resolved within a month was dragged out by Shaolin for 3 long months. Local officials grew increasingly discontented, and public resentment mounted. The Wei River Dam, which should have been repaired, breached once more. Floodwaters swept away vast tracts of fertile land. I heard His Majesty flew into a terrible rage in court. He denounced Shaolin as utterly unfit for responsibility. Shaolin held this grudge against Xiao Jinglan. When Xiao Jinglan and I entered the palace, we encountered him several times. Shaolin's gaze seemed to devour Xiao Jinglan whole. He believed Xiao Jinglan had deliberately sabotaged him. If he truly possessed the talent, wouldn't such achievements come effortlessly? After this incident, since the emperor only verbally reprimanded Shaolin without imposing any punishment, rumors in the capital that Shaolin was the true crown prince grew increasingly rampant. Zhao Yanshua, riding on Shaolin's influence, was even invited to the capital's flower gathering for noble ladies. She looked down on those rare, prized varieties. Instead, she favored the peonies in full bloom, plucking several to adorn her hair. Had the empress not been absent, such behavior would have cost her head countless times over. She deliberately stepped on my skirt hem and then fell to the ground. While apologizing, she shot me a venomous glare. When no one was looking, she revealed mottled red marks beneath her collar. Once Brother Rui becomes crown prince, I shall be his consort. What does it matter if His Majesty favors you? Brother Rui loves only me. I scoffed. Then this palace wishes Miss Zhao her wish fulfilled soon. Zhao Yanshua hadn't expected my retort. Freezing in place like a statue, it felt like punching cotton. After the new year, envoys from the neighboring kingdom delivered a letter. They would soon send their most favored third prince to pay homage. To showcase the grandeur of our great nation, preparations for the banquet alone took several days. Ever since Shaolin suffered an allergic reaction to the pine nut and lily pastry last time, the head steward of the imperial kitchen had been severely punished. This particular dessert remained absent from the palace menu. Yet, upon his arrival in the capital, the third prince of the neighboring kingdom wandered through the city. He happened upon the pine nut and lily pastry at Yipingxian and was utterly enchanted. He enthusiastically bought several boxes to share with everyone. Shaolin repeatedly declined, explaining his allergy to the pastry. Unexpectedly, the third prince's expression darkened. He insisted that Shaolin's refusal was a slight to him personally and to his father, the emperor. Seeing a pine nut and lily cake elevated to such significance, the emperor shot Shaolin a displeased glance. Shaolin steeled himself, swallowed the pastry, and forced a smile to praise its exquisite flavor. Yet, after a long while, no rash appeared on his body. The third prince adopted a carefree demeanor. Well, that's great. Where's the allergy? You weren't deliberately deceiving this prince, were you? The crowd instantly exchanged meaningful glances, their expressions shifting toward Shaolin. The emperor's face slowly darkened. The atmosphere grew awkward. To prove himself, Shaolin snatched the plate of pastries and began stuffing them into his mouth. But no matter how many he consumed, no allergic reaction appeared. Refusing to believe it, he devoured another piece, so hastily that he nearly choked. His flushed face and strained neck were downright embarrassing. Witnessing this, the crowd exchanged meaningful glances. The emperor on the dais grew even more grim-faced. After a piercing stare at Shaolin, he suppressed his anger and declared, perhaps Minister Shin misremembered. The previous allergic reaction wasn't caused by this pastry. Minister Shin, should you not apologize to the third prince? Shaolin's legs trembled violently. Without hesitation, he knelt down. He frantically kowtowed, begging the third prince's forgiveness. The third prince, wine glass in hand, leaned back. Enough. Enough. It's as if this prince were bullying someone. His gaze inadvertently met Xiao Jinglan's, and a knowing smile touched his lips. The grand banquet welcoming the envoy from the neighboring country had turned into a farce. The third prince claimed he couldn't hold his liquor and retired early to the official guest house. As soon as the palace gates closed, the emperor summoned his secret guards to investigate Shaolin. Before long, the guards uncovered records showing Shaolin had visited an apothecary outside the palace to purchase medicine. The emperor's face darkened. What medicine did he buy? The guards respectfully presented the prescription. After careful examination, the imperial physician stated plainly, this formula poses no threat to life, but it will cause the patient to break out in a rash over their entire body. Enraged, the emperor grabbed the teacup beside him and hurled it at Shaolin's head. Blood streamed down Shaolin's temple, yet he dared not raise a hand to wipe it away. His face pale, he protested loudly, "That wasn't me. I never went there." The emperor slammed the portrait retrieved by the secret guard onto his face. "Look for yourself. Who else could this be but you? The palace guards confirmed you left the palace that day. Where did you go?" It truly wasn't him, it was Xiao Jinglan disguised. He deliberately chose the day Shaolin left the palace. Disguised as him, he went to the herbalist and purchased medicine that causes a body-wide rash. He then secretly laced the pine nut and lily pastries with it that day. After Shaolin ate them, his body would break out in a rash, appearing as if he'd suffered an allergic reaction from consuming the pastries. As for where Shaolin went, he wouldn't say, and dared not say. If the emperor learned he'd left the palace that day to frequent brothels and consort with prostitutes, and accepted 10,000 taels of gold from the son of the Minister of Rights to handle his unsavory affairs, his crimes would extend far beyond this single offense. Shaolin still tried to defend himself. Little did he know that the more he spoke, the more suspicion he aroused in the emperor. The emperor propped his forehead, massaging the pressure point at the corner of his eye, then waved for him to be led away. Not sending him straight to the dungeon was already showing leniency. Shaolin remained utterly baffled. Why did his allergic reaction to the pine nut and lily pastry fluctuate? He had clearly not purchased medicine from the apothecary. Yet records of such a purchase surfaced. Even that pastry, clearly a forbidden item within the palace. Yet they kept appearing one after another. By the time he realized he'd been set up, he was so furious he smashed 7 or 8 exquisite porcelain vases in the hall. A trembling palace attendant cautiously reminded him that every ornament was accounted for in the ledgers. Enraged, he kicked the attendant 3 or 4 meters away. Zhao Yanshu still had no idea what had happened. She approached Shaolin with a cheerful smile. "Brother Rui, when exactly does His Majesty plan to name you Crown Prince?" This remark struck Shaolin's raw nerve with pinpoint accuracy. His eyes read, He seized Zhao Yanxua by the throat and flung her onto the bed. The sound of silk brocade tearing mingled with her intermittent cries of pain and pleas for mercy. Soon, it transformed into the woman's wretched, heart-wrenching sobs. The palace maids on duty outside the chamber seemed oblivious to the commotion. They busied themselves sweeping fallen leaves beneath the eaves. Shaolin had lost the emperor's favor over the pine nut and lily pastry incident. The emperor had begun favoring Xiao Jinglan once more. Finally, on a day off, Xiao Jinglan brought me to the palace to pay respects to the emperor. We departed only after accompanying the emperor through his midday meal. Hand in hand, we strolled along the paths of the imperial garden. A palace attendant tending the flowers couldn't help but exclaim, "The crown prince is truly extraordinary in his handsomeness. And the crown princess is like a fairy incarnate." Indeed, another agreed. No wonder His Majesty calls the crown princess the paragon of the imperial ladies. Shaolin, passing by, overheard these words. His face darkened. Gritting his teeth, he bowed to Xiao Jinglan and me. I greeted him with a smile. "Minister Shen, you're of marriageable age. Have you found a lady to your liking?" He seemed taken aback by my unexpected question. Shaolin looked at me with a complex expression, replying after a long pause, "Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. I have no immediate plans to marry." I feigned surprise. "Then what about Miss Zhao?" "Miss Zhao is merely my cousin." I feigned sudden understanding and gently reminded him marriage could be a valuable asset for Minister Shen. A prominent maternal family could. Seeing his eyes flicker, I knew he was swayed. With a smile, Xiao Jinglan and I turned and left. This would surely set Zhao Yanshui off again. That very evening, the Chancellor's residence received an invitation from Shaolin. After several refusals, the Chancellor finally agreed to meet him at the residence. To everyone's surprise, Shaolin laid bare his ambition, openly declaring his desire to marry the Chancellor's daughter and even promising her the position of crown princess. The Chancellor feigned ignorance, offering vague excuses before immediately reporting the matter to the Emperor. Having seized power in his youth, the Emperor detested factionalism and self-serving alliances. During court, he publicly denounced Shaolin's treacherous ambitions before all ministers. He demoted Shaolin and warned him to mend his ways. Upon learning this, Zhao Yanxua dragged Shaolin and began throwing a tantrum. "When we were intimate, you promised to save the crown princess position for me. Now you dare seek another noble lady's hand. Has Brother Rui forgotten the vow he made to Shuer?" Shaolin, already under the Emperor's suspicion, saw his long-suppressed emotions erupt completely. He lashed out, striking Zhao Yanxua hard across the face. The force sent Zhao Yanshui tumbling to the floor. Dazed, she raised a hand to the stinging mark on her cheek, her mind blank. Shaolin felt a pang of guilt as he watched her sitting there. She could no longer aid his rise, and the once lovely beauty fading from her face only deepened his frustration. His irritation grew until he swept his sleeves and left. It was said that Zhao Yanshua's wails echoed throughout the entire palace that day. In his previous life, Shaolin had appeared to love Zhao Yanxua so deeply. Now, stripped of his crown prince status, their childhood sweethearts had turned into bitter enemies. It was nothing more than this. As the palace attendant by Shaolin's side recounted these events to me in detail, I was pruning a newly bloomed peony. The sharp shears snapped, severing the stem and leaves along with the blossoming flower. They fell neatly at my feet. Shaolin remained quiet for a while, daring not to provoke the Emperor's wrath again. Xiao Jinglan and I both felt he wouldn't give up so easily. After all, it was the position of crown prince, second only to the Emperor himself. Once the Emperor passed away, he would ascend the throne, ruling over vast lands. After vanishing for several days, Shaolin suddenly appeared at the imperial study carrying a scroll. He timidly addressed the Emperor. "Your Majesty, I have something to report." "Speak," the Emperor replied impatiently. Shaolin promptly presented everything he held. Your servant accidentally found the senior palace maid who once served the late empress. She revealed that it was she who personally carried me away from the late empress's side and out of the palace. Your Majesty. Look, do you recall this palace maid's appearance? After hearing Shaolin's words, the emperor unrolled the scroll, his expression shifting several times. Summon the secret guards, investigate immediately whether this is true. Shaolin stood before the emperor and added softly, she also said it was she who placed me at that peasant family's doorstep. And she slipped the jade token into my swaddling clothes. The veins bulged in the emperor's hand as he gripped the scroll. After a long moment, he gave a faint nod and dismissed Shaolin. Bring Xiao Jinglan to see me. With a loud clang, the gates of the eastern palace were forced open. The commander of the imperial guards, his face icy, extended his hand toward Xiao Jinglan and said stiffly, His Majesty requests the crown prince to enter the palace. My heart jolted, and I sensed something major had happened in the palace. This display seemed to indicate the emperor had already sentenced Xiao Jinglan to death. The scene from my past life, when Xiao Jinglan was seized by the imperial guards, flashed before my eyes. This time, I would not let him face it alone. Ignoring the guards' attempts to stop me, I insisted on accompanying him. Inside the palace, a woman with a matronly bun knelt on the ground. The emperor instructed Shaolin to identify her. Is this the senior palace maid who served beside the late empress? Shaolin glanced at her and immediately nodded. Indeed. She was the one who carried me out of the palace all those years ago. The emperor studied the woman. As if recalling something, I remember your face. You accompanied the late empress into the palace. Did she order you to swap the child after giving birth to the crown prince? The woman lifted her head slightly, glancing at Shaolin before stealing a look at me and Xiao Jinglan. Lowering her head, she cowed out and replied, The late empress indeed ordered this servant to swap the newborn crown prince with an abandoned infant outside the palace. At these words, the emperor's gaze toward Xiao Jinglan grew even colder, his face spreading with fury. I quietly pulled up my sleeve, revealing a delicate, petite gold locket. Just as the emperor was about to punish Xiao Jinglan, the woman prostrated herself 3 more times. This servant knows well that the imperial bloodline must remain pure. Therefore, I did not swap the crown prince. All present were stunned. The emperor's face turned ashen as he demanded of the woman, How can you prove your words are true? This servant remembers. She replied, That His Highness the Crown Prince bears a plum blossom birthmark upon his chest. Your Majesty may verify it. Under the watchful eyes of all present, Xiao Jinglan loosened his collar, revealing the plum blossom-shaped birthmark. Shaolin was utterly dumbfounded. He shouted that the woman was a fraud. I am the crown prince. I am the crown prince. You're in cahoots with Xiao Jinglan. You're all in on this. But the woman was the one he had found. Now she was said to be Xiao Jinglan's accomplice. With deception piled upon deception, how could the emperor trust him again? At the emperor's command, Shaolin was imprisoned in the imperial jail reserved for death row inmates. Outside the hall, the moonlight was perfect. Yet Shaolin would never again have the chance to see the moonlight of this world. Xiao Jinglan took my hand and led me out of the palace gates. Gazing at the mottled tree shadows cast upon the palace walls, I exhaled deeply. It's all over. Xiao Jinglan bent down, draping his broad cloak over me, and kissed my lips. These past days have been hard on you. Man. Men's words can't be trusted. He speaks of hardship. But back in the Eastern Palace, he'd have to do even more exhausting things with me. Exhausted, I snuggled into Xiao Jinglan's embrace, whimpering softly. These past days, under my instructions, Xiao Jinglan's secret guards had closely monitored Shaolin's movements. They discovered he'd located the senior palace maid who'd served the late empress and had taken her entire family hostage to coerce her. Fortunately, I had her family rescued, using the golden lock as proof. Only then did she change her story. turning the tables on Shaolin. The next day, Yunxiang said someone was waiting for me at the back gate. I hurried over, robes hastily thrown on, and was startled to find the senior palace maid from the late empress's service. She wore plain clothes, clearly avoiding the emperor's spies to come here. I bowed to her. Thank you for your assistance yesterday, Mother. Her expression remained serene, like the still waters of an ancient well. Your Highness need not thank me. What I did was not for your sake. Even if you hadn't saved my family yesterday, I would have acted the same. Once I complete one final task, I shall join the Empress. With that, she departed. Shaolin was imprisoned, and so was Zhao Yanshu. Grinding the inkstone, I wrote the 3 characters Zhao Yanshu on the paper. I sent men to seize Zhao Yanshu and bring her to the Eastern Palace. Her hair was disheveled, and a lingering slap mark still marred her face. Upon seeing me, she screamed wildly, "You bitch! I am the crown princess. I am." I stepped before her and murmured softly, "Your Ruij is already imprisoned. As for you, you will soon join him." Zhao Yanshua stared at me in disbelief, the light in her eyes fading rapidly. "I can give you a sum of money and send you away." I whispered this into her ear. She looked up at me, her expression wavering between shock and doubt. "Just tell His Majesty that Shenrue's jade token was found." Zhao Yanshua pondered my words for a moment before gritting her teeth and asking, "You'll really send me away?" I nodded. She immediately grabbed my hand. "Take me to the palace. Take me to the palace. I'll go right now. If your beloved brother Rui knew you betrayed him like this, he'd be utterly heartbroken." I chuckled softly, mocking their supposedly deep love. But Zhao Yanshua burst into laughter instead, glaring at me with a look of deep resentment. He was the one who forgot his promise first. He was the one who betrayed me. He turned me into this half-human, half-ghost creature. You don't know, do you? I was carrying his child. But he didn't want it. He didn't want it. He said I wasn't worthy to bear his child. He forced me to drink the abortion potion. It hurt so much. I bled so much. Since that's the case, why should I spare his life? I quietly made arrangements within the palace. Zhao Yanshua burst into the Golden Throne Hall, loudly proclaiming she had urgent matters to report to His Majesty. The Emperor was in a rage and initially refused to see her. But upon hearing it concerned Shaolin, he couldn't resist summoning her after all. The moment Zhao Yanshua saw the Emperor, she immediately knelt. She vividly described how Shaolin had found the jade token, how he'd been brought back to the palace by the Emperor's men, and how, upon learning he might be the crown prince, he'd harbored evil intentions. She claimed to have learned from palace servants that the late Empress Dowager was allergic to pine nut and lily pastries. So he bought the medicine to fabricate the illusion that he too was allergic. She spilled it all out like beans spilling from a bamboo tube. I hadn't realized Zhao Yanshua was so ruthless. Her talent for fabricating lies was truly first-rate. Seeing this woman, who had grown up alongside Shaolin, confirm all of it, the Emperor finally realized Shaolin was nothing but a fraud. He was ambitious, yet utterly foolish, allowing himself to be manipulated like a puppet by an emperor. In a fit of rage, the Emperor coughed up blood. Attendants scrambled to summon the imperial physician. Zhao Yanshua seized the chaos to flee the palace. She demanded silver from me, intending to leave. I smiled and ordered the secret guards to escort her to the courtyard where I had once been imprisoned in my past life. Seeing her now haggard form, I told her, "You can go nowhere. You still have sins to atone for." "You bitch! You poisonous woman!" Zhao Yanshua screamed curses at me. I ignored her, ordering the guards, "Cut out her tongue." Under her horrified gaze, first her tongue was severed, then her spine was broken. She lay on the ground, writhing and struggling, emitting agonized whimpers. Sticks rained down on Zhao Yanshu's body. Blow after blow. She writhed like rotten mud. Her body soaked in blood beneath her. What I did to her was merely what she had done to me in her past life. Once I had savored her expression of agony to my heart's content. I ordered, throw her into the brothel. Find some beggars to take care of her properly. Zhao Yanshu, taste the sins you committed in your previous life. Returning to the Eastern Palace. I leaped down from the carriage. Xiao Jinglan's figure came into view. He was waiting for me. Sniffing back tears. I stepped forward and embraced him. Sliding my hand beneath his warm, heavy cloak. Xiao Jinglan. I'm growing more and more vicious. Man. Past deeds reap present consequences. You're doing well. Xiao Jinglan swept me into his arms, carrying me through the winding corridors with steady, powerful strides. He said, Shaolin is a man of dark disposition, narrow-minded, petty, and ruthless, yet utterly lacking in intelligence. Should such a man become crown prince, chaos will surely engulf the realm. He is unworthy of the position and will surely meet his downfall. He is unfit for this role, both for the nation and its people, even if he truly is the crown prince. So what? I will kill him and take his place. Man is vicious. But I am more vicious. The vicious Xiao Jinglan and the vicious Jiang Yuancher. We are indeed a perfect match. Shaolin languished in the imperial prison, his days filled with dread. I heard the guards gave him only 1 bowl of rice and half a bowl of water each day. When I saw him again, I nearly didn't recognize him. Once, he at least looked somewhat human. Now, skin and bones. He bore no resemblance to a man. Zhao Yanshu was well cared for in the brothel. I stuffed Zhao Yanshu, writhing like a maggot, into a sack and brought her before Shaolin. Minister Shin, your beloved betrayed you. She informed His Majesty that you found the jade token and impersonated the crown prince. With both witness testimony and physical evidence, you have no chance of redemption. Shaolin's eyes bulged as he screamed her name, cursing her as a beast and a whore. I untied the sack, spilling a pool of blood. Zhao Yanshuo's blurred face emerged. There. I know you hated her. Isn't this taking care of her for you? Watching Shaolin's face drain of all color, I kindly informed him, oh, and His Majesty has agreed to hand you over to me for punishment. Shaolin's eyes blazed as he screamed, you poisonous bitch. Well, I am indeed a poisonous bitch. So I grinned and shoved Zhao Yanshui toward him, saying, gouge out her eyes, and I'll let you go. He stared at the writhing Zhao Yanshui, his hand trembling as he touched her face. Forgive me. Schwerer. Struggling relentlessly, he clutched Zhao Yanshui tightly and thrust his fingers into her eye sockets with all his strength. A wrenching wail erupted from her throat, echoing through the imperial prison. These two truly were a pair. Shaolin couldn't bear to look at the gouged-out eyeballs, swiftly tossing them behind him before staring at me with pleading eyes. I kicked Zhao Yanshu. She remained motionless, appearing both dead and yet somehow alive. I offered Shaolin a faint smile. This venomous woman, I was only deceiving you. Of course. I knelt before His Majesty, sobbing until I could barely breathe. I confessed that Shaolin and Zhao Yanshu had caused me such heartache I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Xiao Jinglan being dragged away by the imperial guards. His Majesty, filled with remorse, granted my request to sentence Shaolin to death by dismemberment. The day before the execution, I visited Shaolin one last time. He hadn't eaten for days, tortured until his mind was clouded. I smiled at him and said, Minister Shin, did you know? You actually have another name, Shaolin. Xiao is the imperial surname, and Lin signifies grace and benevolence. Hearing this, Shaolin thrashed violently. Light flickered in his fog-filled eyes before fading away. His voice was broken and raspy. He asked me, Why did I see hatred in your eyes the first time we met? Jiang Yuanshi. Have we met before? I looked at him through the prison bars. No. Then why treat me this way? Whether Xiao Jinglan or I becomes crown prince, you would be crown princess. Because you're not as handsome as Xiao Jinglan. You're rather repulsive. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back. I left Xiaolin screaming and shouting inside the cell. I simply covered my ears in silence. On the day of Xiaolin's execution, heavy snow fell over the capital. Xiao Jinglan and I stood at the second-floor window of Yipingxian, the restaurant at the market entrance. We watched the executioner's blade rise and fall, its motion resembling snowflakes drifting down. After about half an hour, the snow grew heavier. The swirling goose feathers seemed intent on burying all past sins. A new fox fur collar wrapped around my neck. I rubbed my hands together and exhaled a puff of breath. Turning my head, my gaze fell upon Xiao Jinglan's jade-like profile. It's freezing. Let's go back. Yunxiang has roasted sweet potatoes waiting for us. Xiao Jinglan took my hand and led me away from Yipingxian. When the waiter came to clear the table, he took the silver left behind, muttering under his breath. Strange. There were definitely two people standing here just now. When did they leave? After spring arrived, His Majesty's health deteriorated steadily. He required a constant supply of medicinal soups to sustain him each day. He had finally learned of the late Empress's deep-seated hatred for him. Thus, he compensated Xiao Jinglan double for all he had lost. He even granted titles of nobility to my father and brother. He summoned Xiao Jinglan and me. Taking Xiao Jinglan's hand, he declared the wisest decision of his life was choosing me as crown prince consort for Xiao Jinglan. Another half-year passed, and the emperor's illness grew critical. Xiao Jinglan was entrusted with regency. Every matter, great or small, demanded his personal oversight. On the day the emperor passed away, Xiao Jinglan and I kept vigil by his bedside. Zhou Nanny, whom we hadn't seen in ages, also arrived. The sight of her stirred memories of the late empress within him. His lips murmured, Qinghe. Qinghe. I've come to find you. Zhou Nuer spoke coldly, Your Majesty. The empress is already dead. Do you still intend to disturb her peace in the afterlife? Though emaciated and frail, the emperor's eyes widened at her words, You. What do you mean by this? Nanny Zhou stared at the emperor, her eyes icy. Your Majesty, you are unaware that you have already killed your own son with your own hands. Shenrui is the true crown prince. You murdered General He, forcibly took my mistress, and forced Her Majesty into pregnancy. A man like you deserves to burn in hell. Her Majesty's remains no longer lie in the imperial mausoleum. This servant buried her alongside General He. May Your Majesty never meet Her Majesty again in the next life. The emperor suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. You. Qinghe is mine. Qinghe is my wife for all eternity. Autumn of the 14th year of Qingyuan, Emperor Zhaoyuan passed away. After Xiao Jinglan ascended the throne, he made me empress. We stood together upon the city tower. His arm encircled my shoulders as he leaned close, whispering softly in my ear, You and I, year after year, shall watch the sun and moon endure, the rivers and mountains remain steadfast. The following year, the emperor reformed the state system, ruling jointly with the empress. The end.